Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
This is on you until you choose to do something different. This will continue to happen. Somebody needs to stand up for the children of this state, or they will continue to be killed, just like they were killed in Uvalde yesterday.
Emotions, opinions erupt during a school mass shooting news conference involving the governor of Texas. Former Congressman Beto O'Rourke denouncing Governor Greg Abbott's remarks, saying, "This is on you." Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Whether it's Uvalde, Texas, or any town, USA, grief, anger, and outcry are all too real. Following yet another mass shooting, this one now claiming the lives of 19 children, 2 teachers, 17 others injured. And tonight, we are learning more about the victims, the 18-year-old gunman, and the call for action involving guns and violence. Our coverage begins with Chris Nguyen.
What should have been a joyous day just before summer break turned into a nightmare when 19 children and 2 teachers were shot and killed at Robb Elementary on Tuesday. Families, instead of planning vacations, are now planning funerals.
Evil swept across Uvalde yesterday.
These are the faces of just some of the victims. 4th grade teacher Eva Mireles, 10-year-old Ameri Jogarza, 10-year-old Jose Flores, and Javier Lopez smiling here after making honor roll that morning. The suspected gunman is an 18-year-old who police say shot his grandmother before going to the school and opening fire on a 4th grade class.
He was dropped out of school. He had no criminal history that we've been able to find.
As the community grapples with this horrific tragedy, the conversation in Washington turns to curbing gun violence.
Our country is sickened and outraged by the senseless evil that struck Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas.
One nation under guns. It doesn't have to be that way. Our parents don't need to drop their kids off at school and wonder if their kid will be next.
Many now wondering whether these words from politicians will be turned into action. Chris Nguyen, KPBS News.
California leaders are taking action. Today, Governor Gavin Newsom announced efforts to expedite legislation to protect communities from gun violence.
We're going to control the controllables, the things that we have control of. Those states like California that have the most progressive policies in restricting the abuse and proliferation of guns have consistently outperformed other states in terms of gun murder rates and gun death rates.
Over a dozen bills are working their way through the Democratic-controlled state legislature right now. The goal is to have the bills on the governor's desk by the end of June. Hearing about so many young kids being killed is hard to take, and the news is not lost on our school kids who have to try and cope as well. Here's KPBS reporter Kitty Alvarado.
Teachers, students, and parents are reacting to another mass shooting at a school, this time in Uvalde, Texas.
I was simply gutted, devastated, just couldn't understand this incomprehensible act committed on children. I broke down in tears.
Maria Ortega is deeply invested in local schools. She's the mother of kids in 2 districts and also sits on the board of 3 charter schools. She says the shooting feels different.
The Buffalo murders, as well as I think it's COVID. It's a combination of so many things, and it really just hits so hard, thinking that these are babies, and the utter terror that these babies were feeling at that moment.
And says teachers in particular are having a hard time in the aftermath of the. She made it a point to check on her friends who are teachers. They're not okay.
How are you doing? And she said she got to school this morning and she simply sat in her car and cried.
This is where staff members who know our kids well, lean in.
Greg Mizell, the assistant superintendent in charge of safety at the Poway Unified School District, says this is a tough day for everyone in their district. He wants them to know not only do they have emotional support at the ready, but also security and other measures are in place to keep them safe.
Each and every one of our students deserves, right, to walk on a campus where they feel safe, where they feel welcomed, where they feel supported. And on a day like today, the relationships really kick in. We're taking care of each other.
He says they have emotional support for children who are troubled, make contacts with law enforcement if necessary, and learn from every tragedy.
I promise you, when we know more about this situation, we will debrief it. We will learn what we can from it, and we will do what we can forward to ensure we're better prepared. Even more so.
San Diego County Sheriff Tony Ray says their deputies are wearing mourning bands in solidarity with Uvalde.
We don't do this for every person that dies, but when you have normally it's like a localized, but we've been having so many of these shootings so recently here that we care about all these folks.
He says their protocol kicks in immediately after mass shootings happen.
The protocol we're following is we're trying to be visible. We are putting our deputies near the schools, the churches, I say, where people gather together. So they know that we're out there protecting them.
And they also reach out to neighborhood and business watch groups, but says he can't emphasize enough how important it is for people in the community to communicate and ask for help before it's too late.
Oftentimes I talk to people and they say, yeah, I thought something was wrong, but I know you're busy. I didn't want to bother you. Well, we want to be bothered. If somebody sees something, they think someone is acting weird or strange, or they're uncomfortable about something, it's okay to call the sheriff's department.
Kitty Alvarado, KPBS News.
Another person has died at San Diego Central Jail, the 10th in custody death this year. The Sheriff's Department said deputies conducting security checks found the 64-year-old man unresponsive in his cell shortly after midnight. Deputies, medical staff, and paramedics tried to revive him, but he was pronounced dead just before 1 a.m. The man's name is withheld pending family notification, and an autopsy is scheduled for tomorrow. 2 years ago today, a Minneapolis police officer held his knee on George Floyd's neck for nearly 9.5 minutes. When video of the killing was made public, it sparked months of protests and put police use of force in focus. Today, President Biden signed an executive order requiring federal law enforcement agencies to review and revise use of force policies. It will also create a database to help track officer misconduct. However, partisan gridlock has kept Congress from passing the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. KPBS reporter John Carroll talked to local justice advocates to get their read on where things stand now.
No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace!
The summer of 2020, the streets of cities large and small across this country filled with people outraged at the murder of George Floyd. Their call was clear, a demand that legislators at all levels pass laws to address the issue of police violence.
You could actually, of course, make a really compelling case that things have gotten worse.
When he isn't giving lectures at San Diego State, Dr. Darwin Fishman is volunteering with the Racial Justice Coalition of San Diego. His take on the current situation is partly due to the fact that a year and a half after the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act passed in the House, it remains stalled in the Senate. But Fishman says it's more than that.
For me, it was never just a simple thing about law enforcement and excessive force. There is a real fundamental devaluing of life we have in this country, and it's very pronounced for racial minorities.
I assist individuals in filing complaints against law enforcement.
From Malcolm Mutaki's standpoint, where we find ourselves 2 years out from Floyd's murder is not good.
And still we see a total lack of accountability and a total disregard for the life of Black and brown people in San Diego, and I would think it's safe to assume in other parts of the country.
What can be done? Mutaki's group, Pillars of the Community, is supporting an ordinance called Protect that will be decided by the San Diego City Council.
I would encourage people to keep an eye out for that, and for those who care about trying to curb some of this brutality, support that measure.
It does take those that have privilege, that have resources, to expend even more energy, more time to help us get on track.
Fishman says we must get on track because he says when people lose confidence in the ballot, they are likely to turn to the bullet. John Carroll, KPBS News.
San Diego is seeing more than 1,000 COVID cases reported per day as experts warn that we're likely seeing another surge in infections. With at-home testing, the spread is likely larger than we're actually seeing. Summer is around the corner, and that means that more tourists will be coming to the region. If you're traveling, health officials recommend being up to date on booster doses and wearing masks, especially if you can't avoid large crowds. The warnings come as the virus is continuing to mutate with new, more contagious variants.
This is really troubling. That is, that we're seeing variants emerge of the current Omicron that are worse than Omicron. Gear up, because we're not done. This is far from a pandemic state that's in a contained zone. That's what we should be striving for.
This week, a suspected case of monkeypox was reported in Northern California. Dr. Eric Topol says people shouldn't be overly concerned. The viral disease has caused deaths in Africa and is similar to smallpox, with people developing skin rashes. Topol says researchers are trying to determine if it's becoming more contagious. San Diego County residents can expect more calls for water conservation, even as local water officials insist the region has enough. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson has details.
The governor wants California to cut back water use across the board, and San Diego water managers say they stand ready to help. State Water Board officials approved rules starting June 1st that ratchet down residential water use and keep commercial customers from watering ornamental lawns. The San Diego County Water Authority's Jeff Stevenson says the desalination plant and water deals with Imperial County secure local supplies.
Despite the fact that we've developed the supplies and we have the water available, it's never okay to waste. And we're always moving towards becoming more efficient with that water that we do have.
Local officials say they will promote conservation in an effort to help cut water use around California by 15%. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Major developments today in the effort to address the growing baby formula crisis. A large shipment from Europe arrived in the U.S. as lawmakers press the FDA and manufacturers about their response to the shortages. Jen Sullivan has a closer look.
A critical day in the effort to resolve the growing baby formula shortage in the U.S. A second international shipment arriving on the same day that lawmakers grilled manufacturers on Capitol Hill.
I'm looking for answers and for a long-term plan moving forward so this doesn't happen again.
The three companies that control the majority of baby formula supply in the U.S., Abbott, Gerber, and Reckitt, testifying before a group of House lawmakers. Also in the hot seat, the FDA commissioner, who acknowledged the agency's slow response to the shortage and promised changes.
You will see changes in the near future. Our requests for funding and authority are essential in concert with improved operations and leadership.
On Wednesday, more than 100,000 pounds of infant formula arrived in D.C. from Germany. It's the second shipment under President Joe Biden's Operation Fly Formula initiative. The formula is being shipped to a Nestle distribution center in Pennsylvania. Nestle says the formula will be distributed to hospitals and retailers nationwide as soon as this weekend.
Right now, the batches coming in, though, are going to wherever infants are who are dependent upon this critically special formula, who have critical medical problems, no matter where they may be.
Abbott Nutrition says it plans to restart work at its Michigan plant on June 4th, for the first time since a nationwide recall and shutdown of the plant, which produced nearly half of the infant formula in the U.S. For today's Consumer Watch, I'm Jen Sullivan.
Students have dealt with a lot over the last 2 years, but now a group of students in Chula Vista say they have another issue on their hands. The Castle Park high schoolers say they're dealing with mold, termites, and unsafe buildings on campus each day. Now they're asking the district to take action. They're using a social media site to document their claims and ask when the campus will see any of the millions of dollars of bonds approved for the district.
It's time. It's been 60 years since this school was built. PE bathrooms from the drama building, from just windows in general, cracks in windows. We have mold in buildings. We have a huge termite problem.
The district released a statement saying it takes all concerns very seriously and that they sent maintenance to review the needs of the facility. A community meeting for parents and students is planned for next Thursday. The San Diego City Council has approved a new set of rules for shared electric scooters. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says the goal is to improve safety and accountability.
San Diego has taken a relatively light touch to regulating scooters, and critics have been calling for a crackdown. The new rules require the devices to be parked off the sidewalk in a designated area, and scooter companies have to automatically slow the scooters down when they're being ridden on a sidewalk. Councilmember Joe LaCava says it's about time.
We have all seen too many abuses by individuals using the scooters under the old framework. Underage riders, multiple riders on a single scooter, scooters dumped anywhere and everywhere.
Some council members were concerned the new rules wouldn't be enforced or that the cost of enforcement will fall on taxpayers. City staffers say that's why they're moving to a new system where scooter companies have to compete for the right to do business in San Diego. If one isn't following the rules, the city can kick them out.
And we have a detailed steps for issuing of citations and notifications to operators up to contract termination if needed. We will make sure we'll be up to date and that what's expected from the operators is actually done.
By July, the city plans on allowing only 4 scooter companies to operate in San Diego. Right now, there are 6. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
If you're heading out of town for the Memorial Day weekend, you're going to have a lot of company. Memorial Day marks the unofficial start of summer, and AAA estimates over 39 million people will be traveling this weekend. That's up more than 8% over 2021. It's especially good news for the airline industry, with estimates that air travel will be up by 25% over the last year, which is pretty close to what it was in 2019. And major construction is on the way for San Diego International Airport. Work will begin in front of Terminal 1 beginning on June 5th and last through 2024, prompting officials to urge passengers to plan ahead getting to and from the terminal. Parking will also be significantly reduced this summer. Then, starting on June 15th, the Terminal 1 parking lot will be permanently closed, as will the pedestrian bridge. The work will make way for a new Terminal 1 parking plaza, as well as a new on-airport roadway. If you need to communicate with someone online but want to keep it secret, an app called Signal is a good bet. It's fully encrypted, meaning messages cannot be downloaded or even shared. But what happens when government employees start using it? KPBS investigative reporter Claire Tregeser examines how officials might be using Signal to circumvent the public's right to know.
Just after noon on a Monday last June, 2 city council staffers had a text exchange. "So nice to meet you today. I'm shocked you're a campaign person," Jared Miller-Sklar wrote to Caitlin Willoughby. "I know I am young, but if I am following in your footsteps, that is definitely a great sign because you have done some great things," Willoughby responded. Then Miller-Sklar gave his junior colleague some advice. Download the messaging app Signal. "Def download Signal. It's preferable for me for communicating about campaign/work stuff, or, of course, just the tea," he wrote. The California Public Records Act says most communications about government business must be available to the public. So if Miller-Sklar is sending work messages via Signal, those messages are very likely public records. But when KPBS asked to see them, he said he didn't have any.
There should be policies in place preventing them from using Signal to conduct government business.
This raises bright red flags for Shayla Nathu, a lawyer with the open government advocacy group Californians Aware.
It's a means of avoiding disclosure to the public under the CPRA. It's it kind of flies in the face of transparency and government accountability.
She's also deeply troubled by a Signal setting that permanently deletes messages after 30 seconds.
After they're deleted, there's no record of that communication on either the actual device or on a server. And that renders a search for public records upon request by a person such as yourself it renders that impossible.
Miller-Sklar declined to do an interview for this story, but answered questions by email. He said people in his office do use Signal, but not for government business and not during work hours. However, in his text to Willoughby, Miller-Sklar specifically mentions work stuff, and he sent those messages just after noon on a Monday. Records show other staffers in Campillo's office also use Signal. They frequently wrote things like, just texted you on Signal. Yeah, I'll send it to you on Signal. Or once, putting this here to send on Signal because, good Lord, this was wild. San Diego County Supervisor Nathan Fletcher's office also uses Signal constantly for communication about government business, from a staffer asking for the office key code to talking points for Fletcher's State of the County speech. Fletcher's office provided all those Signal messages in a response to a KPBS public records request.
They could have a clear, bright line which says if you're doing public business, do it on the public agency's own system.
David Loy is the legal director of the First Amendment Coalition. He's troubled by the widespread use of Signal by Fletcher's team, even though they are open about it. But he's even more concerned by Campillo's office.
The execution and operation of the Public Records Act does depend to a large degree on agency good faith, and the California Supreme Court presumed that agencies would act in good faith. And if they are not, in fact, that undermines and defeats the purpose of the entire system of open government.
A bigger issue is the public wouldn't know about government Signal use without evidence like what KPBS obtained, emails and text messages that specifically mention the app. Nathu, with Californians Aware, joked, it's like Fight Club.
I feel like first rule of using Signal as a public official should be don't mention that you use Signal.
Claire Tregesser, KPBS News.
A new telling sign demonstrating the severity of the western drought. The water level in Lake Mead, the nation's largest reservoir, dropped below 1,050 feet elevation for the first time, and that also revealed more surprises, like a number of boats once underwater. The reservoir provides water to roughly 25 million people in Arizona, Nevada, California, and Mexico. If levels continue to drop, it will impact on agriculture and municipal water use on a much broader scale.
Warm conditions will continue through our Thursday, with temperatures warming up to 70s, maybe even some 80s, and then cooler and cloudy for your Friday, and that's going to run right on through the holiday weekend. And then on top of that, we'll also be seeing some very strong winds in the passes and the mountains over the next several days. So lots to talk about here across San Diego County. Temperatures for tonight falling back to some 60s. You're still going to be dealing with some low cloud coverage into those evening hours that last into those early morning hours, and even some foggy conditions as well. So keep that in mind if you're going to be traveling on the roadways. Temperatures falling back to 60 for Oceanside. More interior, you won't see as many clouds, so temperatures will cool down to some lower 50s for Ramona, El Cajon, 58 degrees. Borrego Springs cooling down to about 70 degrees. Widespread heat continues across the southwest for your Thursday. Note that the jet stream taking a little bit of a dip, and you will see that increasing onshore flow. So that's really going to ramp up the winds, as we mentioned, in the passes and the mountains. You're also going to see things keeping on the cooler side for your Thursday right along the immediate coastal areas where you can see those clouds in those early morning hours. It does burn off a little bit by the afternoon, so you'll get some sunshine in there, but it is going to be pretty thick cloud coverage just lingering right off the coast there through the evening hours, and then eventually slowly working its way back onshore across Chula Vista, San Diego, and Oceanside. So again, it will make for another mild evening tomorrow. But during the day tomorrow, I mentioned some 80s. Places like Ramona, you could see that. Borrego Springs, 103. Mount Laguna, 72 for that high. Campo, 84. Quite warm for your Friday across areas of the Great Basin. Further to northern Nevada, across some of the Sierra, you'll experience some cooler temperatures, and eventually we'll see that too, especially from the coastal areas. Inland as well, dropping down to 60 for the high next Monday, and across the mountains taking a dip down to the 50s for highs on Monday, and across the desert triple digits, but cooling down to some 90s and even 80s by next Monday. For KPBS, I'm meteorologist Michelle Rotella.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, what we know about the elementary school shooting in Texas and the victims whose lives were cut short. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
And here's another look at today's top story. The nation is mourning the murders of 19 children and 2 adults who were shot and killed at an elementary school in Texas. The suspected gunman is an 18-year-old who police say shot his grandmother before going to the school and opening fire on a 4th grade class. President Biden is expected to visit the victims' families soon. As the conversation in Washington, D.C. turns to curbing gun violence, Governor Gavin Newsom announced efforts to push over a dozen gun control bills through the state legislature. And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. Californians pay more for electricity than people in most other parts of the country. On Morning Edition, a look at why those costs are likely to keep rising. And following the latest mass shooting, California is moving toward allowing lawsuits over illegal guns. That's on Midday Edition. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.